welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, so as this is probably the final episode of the show for this year, I thought we'd do something a little bit different. As you know, not only do I enjoy a good dram, I also enjoy my wines, and just as importantly, I enjoy a good beer as well. So let's combine the two, shall we? So what have we got? We've got there is a tenuous link, bear with me. We'll be looking at 4 of the beers from the Harviestoun Brewery in Scotland, and the link is Highland Park. Basically, what they produce is a beer called Old Engine Oil, which is, as you can see, quite a dark beer, and then they produce a range called Ola Dubh, which is Scottish for black oil, and they age those in casks that once held Highland Park whisky. So you've got the Ola Dubh 12-year-old, which is aged or finished off, I think, 6 months in ex-12-year-old Highland Park casks, the Ola Dubh 16, which is finished in ex-16-year-old Highland Park casks, and we've got the Ola Dubh 18, which I think you can figure out what that's been finished off in. So that's the range for today's episode of the show. I'm kind of doing this a little bit backward. Normally I do a bit of waffle and then introduce the range, but I'm introducing the range and then I'll do a bit of waffle. See what I mean? Different. It's the end of the year. It's fluid. So that's going to be this afternoon's little tasting. The Old Engine Oil is brewed and bottled at 6%, where all the rest are bottled at 8%. Well, Ola Dubh 12 is 8%, and yep, they're all 8%. Just checking. And so it'll be interesting to see what the different casks brings to the beer. So we'll obviously start with the Old Engine Oil, which is the basis, and then see progress from there. So before we start tasting, I'll give you a little bit of a potted history then, shall I? So Harviestoun. It was founded by some chap called Glenn Brooker, who started brewing in his shed back in 1983. I mean, I guess this is how a lot of people start off. They tinker with beer in the shed or in the kitchen or what have you, and things tend to sort of either not progress or progress, I guess, as the case may be. So in 3 years later, in 1986, he converted a small farm into a brewery, and 2 years later it was a fully functioning brewery, and they were churning out the beers. A year later it had a refit, much was the obvious demand for what he was creating, which allowed him to obviously get in some sort of better kit and give it an influx of cash. So the next stage in the development of the brewery was in 1994, when they released a really nice lager, in actual fact, called Highland, which went on to win specialty beer class of CAMRA in 96, 97 and 98, and I would definitely suggest getting your hands on a bottle of that because it's really good. And then 6 years later on, this baby came along. Apparently, according to the blurb on the back label, it's due to his love of classic cars, and so it's a dark beer, and he called it Old Engine Oil, so which is really cool. Great name, in my opinion. 2 years later, they did a deal to get hold of some ex-Dalmore casks and started to age this stuff in those, and released a limited edition bottling called Old Engine Oil Special Reserve, which is obviously where the whole thing kind of kicked off. 2 years on from that, in 2004, they built a new 60-barrel brew house. 2 years from that, in 2006, the company was sold to Caledonian Brewing Company, and in 2007 they did a deal with Highland Park and produced Ola Dubh. The following year, Caledonian Brewing Company was taken over by Heineken, and apparently Harviestoun was not required. I bet they're kicking themselves now, considering how it's gone on from strength to strength. Anyway, so there was a management buyout, which obviously then returned the brewery back to its independent nature, and they've carried on brewing ever since, and apparently are still expanding, and expanded last year into the warehouse next door. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of a potted history. I mean, you can find more information obviously on their website, but what we're interested in is what their beer tastes like. So let's make a start. Right, okay, so I think the first and obvious thing to notice, obviously the head has kind of gone down a bit from this, and you'll have to excuse me not using proper beer tasting glasses because I don't have any. So it's a case of, well, do I use whiskey glasses or do I just stick it in a half-pint mug? So it's going in a half-pint mug. So yeah, the first thing you notice that it's quite a head on this, or was quite a head on this, but not on the other ones. It's obviously the aging in or finishing in the in cask has obviously sort of affected the ability of the beer to give a bit of head, shall we say? But anyway, let's see what the nose gives us, shall we? Now that's a dark, malty, chocolatey, little bit of coffee, a little bit of slightly burnt coffee. It's got a lovely aromatic character. It's got a certain almost a not perfume, but quite a nice fragrance to it. But it is lovely and dense and fresh. Palate. Ooh, that's good. Dark, soft, malty. A little bit of chocolate, a little bit of bitter dark chocolate on the finish, a little bit of coffee grain, but it's so smooth, it's full, really gently bitter. That is a lovely beer. I mean, 6%, doesn't really taste it in actual fact. I mean, it's all quite sort of harmonious, really. But the thing is, with a lot of the stronger beers, you do tend to find that the alcohol can be a little bit sort of intense, but in this it's all kind of wrapped up quite nicely. So lovely beer, really nice. Right, so moving on to the Ola Dubh 12. Let's see if 6 months in a 12-year-old Highland Park cask, well, you know what I think about 12-year-old Highland Park at the moment, so let's see what the nose gives us on this. Not quite so effusive, shall we say. It's taken the edge off the sort of the perfume note, the sort of aromatic character. It's a little bit more wood notes, a little bit of a whiskey note coming through, but essentially it's fairly similar as you'd expect. Again, sort of dark coffee, but it's got more of an edge to it, and I think the sort of the whiskey is kind of taken certainly off the aromas, the sweetness, and given it a little bit more of an edge to it. About. Yeah, you can really taste the whiskey influence on that. Like on the nose, it's less sweet, it's less fuller, it's less richer. It's more kind of focused, crisper. Again, it's still dark, malty, still got plenty of chocolate character, but certainly there's that whiskey note now and a little bit of wood. Dries a little bit right at the very finish. Doesn't, again, really soft, not a huge amount of bittering. But yeah, that's really impressive. Okay, on to the Ola Dubh 16. Let's see if there's any real noticeable difference. Not getting a huge amount of difference on the nose. Maybe a little bit more whiskey character, a little bit more sort of dried fruit notes, a little bit more smoke possibly. but again, it's very similar to the 12. It's that sort of crisp, lean kind of character. Oh. The whisky notes do taste a lot more mature. Darker fruits, more wood character. I'm getting almost like some sherry notes, some sherry wood notes. A little bit of spice as well now coming through. Again, very similar in that it's very clean, very crisp. Lingers a bit longer, possibly. Lingers a bit longer. You know what I mean. Yeah, that's really interesting. It's certainly got a little bit more complexity than the Ola Dubh 12. Yeah, that's nice. That's really good. And finally on to the 18. Let's see what, any change in the nose on this one then. Not a huge amount of difference between it and the 16, to be honest with you. Again, it's still quite chocolatey, malty. There's a definite mature whisky note. Yeah, that's nice. Oh. Ooh, that's deep. A lot more whisky character, a lot more spice, a lot more sort of rich sherry cask influence, a lot more wood, which is surprising considering it's only spent the same amount of time, 6 months in the cask, but that cask seems to be giving it a lot more wood character. Dried fruits again, malt, chocolate. More chewier, more malty than, more treacly than the 16. I don't know whether that's just a batch variation. I would imagine so. I can't imagine that just putting it in a different type of cask has made it sort of more chewy. But really long, really chocolatey. That's lovely. That's a really nice beer. Right, okay, so let's sum this up. This was all fairly short and sweet, and yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's certainly the aging or the finishing off in barrel has certainly taken the sweetness and taken some of the roundness and body from the beer, but then it's added in obviously the whisky notes. It's added in a bit of wood character as well, which is obviously seems to have got progressively more as we move from the 12 to the 18, which is quite surprising given the fact that, like I said, they only spend 6 months in the cask, but they're all very good and quite distinctive, it has to be said. So yeah, there you go. That's old engine oil and Ola Dubh for you. So hopefully you've enjoyed this episode of the show. Like I said, this will be the last one for this year. When we get into the new year, I should say, or we get back to normal, we'll get back to tasting some whiskey. But for now, so all that's left to say is I hope you had a really good Christmas. I hope you got some fantastic drams in your Santa sack or whatever you put out for him. And I'll obviously see you in the new year. So all that's left to say is good dramming and good afternoon.